Hi guys. First, um, before I get into too far, I was sitting here getting ready and setting the phone up, and then I was like, "What in the world?" And there's the shepherd's uh, nook behind me that I have. I bought that at a rummage sale last summer because I just love Hind's feet, and it made me think of it. And so it's so funny that I sat down to do this, and it was behind me. So that's pretty awesome. So today we are going to be starting. It's going to be broken up into two parts. This is Hannah's account of how she got the inspiration to write Hind's Feet on High Places. And I think that the best part about it is because I know that so many of us relate to the story and we read it and are like, that's me. And as I had mentioned in reading the stories, that is so much me to the point that even sometimes during a day, it's something that I would say something or go somewhere and then read the book and she said the exact same thing or went to, a similar place. And so this has just been a tremendous story for me. I don't know that Miss Hannah ever knew the impact that she had. She by now has gone on to be with the Lord. I believe that was in 1990 that she passed. And so this is her account. In the book, it takes up just shy of 50 pages. So we're going to break that up into two parts. My disclaimer I'm going to start off with is that, of course, these places that she went to, I've never been. So if you know where they are, I could probably slaughter the names of it and not pronounce them correctly. So please forgive me. But we're going to go ahead and get started with what she called lessons learned on the slopes of the high places. This was written during a 3-week visit to Switzerland on my way back to Israel after a short visit to England following the death of my father and the winding up of his affairs. I had said farewell, as I thought, to the old home in which I had been born and where I had been welcomed back by my father on all my furloughs from missionary work in the Middle East. Come up to me in the mount. And what's awesome about this is that she literally also has the dates and everything that she went and did this. So this is Brunvalt on Monday, May 23rd, 1949. And the Lord said, come up to me into the mount, and a cloud covered the mount, and the glory of the Lord abode upon the mount, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the seventh day he called unto Moses out of the midst of the cloud, and the Lord spake. That is Exodus 24, verses 12, 15, 16, and also chapter 25, verse 1. Through mist and cloud and by a strange path where I could never see more than one step at a time, the Lord has brought me here to Switzerland, to a high mountain apart. I believe that he will speak to me out of the cloud, for I know he has something to say, and I long to hear it. 3 days ago, as I came up in the funicular railway from Linthal to Brunvalt in Glarus, there was such thick mist and cloud that nothing at all was visible. Not a shallot or tree or wall could be seen. And even the Berg Frieden deaconess house was quite invisible until we got to the door. The sisters said that for over a week it had been like that, and it might continue the same way for weeks longer. Humanly speaking, it was very disappointing to come all the way to Switzerland after so many years gone and be unable to see anything. But that evening, from my window in the huge wooden chalet, I saw one patch of rocky precipice and snow exposed for a few moments through the driving rain and mist. I had been told that the snow mountains rise in a glorious range just the other side of the valley, but I could have never guessed so from what was visible. Next morning, I awoke at 4:30 a.m. and there the mountains were. How right those people are who say that one might just as well not come to Switzerland unless one is prepared to rise before the sun. Now the mountains appeared. Still laying in bed, I saw them through the uncurtained windows, their tops still buried in the cloud, but a glorious snow and rock range rising like a wall just across the narrow valley. All that day the mist was clearing, but the clouds remained low and still hid most of the view. Today I woke at 5 a.m. and lo, clear and rosy in the dawn light against a black ground of calm blue sky were the high places I so longed to see. Now I am sitting on a huge green slope starred with tiny blue gentians, and the buttercups are scattered like gold all around me. This is the Brunwald Alp, and the snow mountains rise like walls on three sides of it. I sit here and look out on beauty beyond expression. To the right is an immense cliff over which the Brumbach waterfall leaps down with the noise of many waterfalls. Opposite me is a mountain with huge rock walls and seven peaks rising one above the other. Beside them, though not quite so high, is another peak shaped like a horn. The seven crested mountain is the Ohrstock, and the horn is called Hoher Turn. This is the mountain that dominates the scene in Brunwald and is more picturesque than any of the other neighboring giants. To the left rise great ramparts and ranges of snow and rock. While I sit here in brilliant sunshine, an immense dark cloud has overshadowed the heights, and I hear a distant peal of thunder. So through cloud and mist, I have come to the place on the mount where I believe the Lord is going to speak to me and reveal the reason why he has brought me back to the beloved Swiss mountains after an absence of so many years. The Brumbach Falls. The whole neighborhood is filled with the sound of rushing water pouring down over and between the rocks. For me, the two falls, the Brumbach and the Zilbach, are like two glorious angels of love, leaping down from the heights to carry life and power to the valleys below. Oh, my Lord, what do you want to say to me today? Help me to hear your voice. Teach me to understand the language spoken by your creation all around me. Help me to receive into my innermost soul the great truth that, to whom much is given, of them shall much be required. Lifting my eyes, I look across the valley at the Brumbach Falls and see the water pouring itself down in an extraordinary ecstasy of self-abandoned giving. And I know now that is my Lord's message for me. I have asked him to help me understand the language of this book of nature he has created. And the first message and lesson his creation utters is this one. It is so clear that I do understand it. It speaks of love's eternal, ecstatic joy in ceaseless, blissful giving. The first characteristic of true love is humility, the pouring of oneself down lower and lower in self-effacement and self-denial. The message of running water always is go lower, find the lowest place. That is the only way to true fulfillment. The next characteristic of love is giving. The poured out life gives life and power to others. The more love gives, the more it fulfills itself, for it is love's prerogative to give and give and give. The third characteristic of love is service. The Brumbach Falls, in the act of giving themselves, serve the entire valley and beyond. The water means a supply of irrigation, electricity, and light for many, many homes, gardens, and orchards. To be utterly abandoned to the goal of giving oneself to others and going down lower is the joy and ecstasy of love. Perfect love casts out fear. Yes, that is what the waters utter so exultingly as it rushes toward the great terrifying rocky lip of the gorge and plunges over, utterly abandoned and unafraid of the dreadful depths below, into which it must fall, down onto the threatening rocks below. Watching the waters as they leap over the edge and following them with my eyes as they fall downward, I discover that the whole movement is one of the most breathtaking examples of utter rejoicing and of triumph. Almost delirious abandonment that I have ever seen. If one looks at the falls as a whole, they are marvelously beautiful. But if one gazes at one particular part of the water as it plunges over the rocky lip and then watches as it falls right down, the almost crazy, blissful abandonment is staggering. I never saw motion so utterly expressive of joy. The movement looks like perfect rapture, fearless surrender to a hitherto unknown delight, the greatest it is possible to experience. The downward motion is light, adventurous, perfectly happy. The water, after casting itself over the rocks, seems to be held up and supported as though floating down on wings. A glorious contradiction indeed. How can one abandon oneself in this way? Well, the scene before me answers that question. The falls come down from the heights. Before they can do that, they must first come the experience of He maketh my feet like hind's feet, and setteth me upon mine high places. Psalm 18:33. One cannot get a mighty and powerful fall of water if there is only a low place and a short way for it to fall. But it is the high places of faith and obedience that makes the falls of love possible. The Orstock, the great seven-pinnacled mountain opposite, is a wonderful picture of spiritual experience, rising from height to height, peak to peak. The summits of the high places are the powerhouses from which love pours itself down in joyful surrender. One can never truly love until by faith and surrendered obedience, one reaches the high places and there learns to go skipping and leaping on the mountains of difficulty as though they were a paved road. Everything around me seems to be designed to emphasize this lesson. I have been brought to a place where all God's creation appears to be uttering things in a language which only becomes clearly audible and understood by hearts that have been learning in the school of suffering. It is the language which one begins to spell out in one's innermost soul when one is on a cross to which self is being transfixed by nails of pain and anguish of heart. It compares to the experience in the siege of Jerusalem in the years in terrorist-ridden area which led up to this past year, 1948. Have I not been brought here to experience some great readjustment in my spiritual nature? Instinctively, the old nature at once cries out, Oh, will it be very painful? Hasn't there been enough of it already, dear Lord Jesus? And then I laugh. Show the clay vessel on the Lord's wheel, and under his loving molding hands, think of pain in the last stage of a long, joyous yielding to his patient fashioning. The only thing that matters is that the adjustment of abandonment to selfless love be made perfectly so that I stop seeking to be loved and abandon myself to the joy of giving love to others. How beautifully someone has summed up this in the words of an old Quaker lady that she quoted to me. Self sacrifice is the ecstasy of giving the best we have to the one we love the most. The sound of falling water and the bells of the cows as they graze on the mountain slopes are the only things audible in this quiet valley. But the sound of the water is continuous, it never stops. It is saying over and over and over again, the secret of experiencing true love is to go lower. Pour yourself down, go lower and lower. Give, 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 and serve with joyful abandonment. Oh, my Lord, how I thank you. The Cecil Bond. Brown Vault, May 24th, 1949. Yesterday morning, the Lord was teaching me the most fascinating lessons from the Cecil Bond. High above Brown Vault on the slopes of Eggstock is the Orstock House. It stands near a great precipice and is connected with Brown Vault. Far beneath it by the Cecil Bond, which is a system of overhead cables slung from lofty pylons fixed in the rocky slopes of the mountain. On these cables, cars are hung, which are electrically caused to slide up the cables, carrying provisions to the Orstock house. So if you have this idea in mind, almost kind of like you can look online and see, you can find pictures of what they actually look like. But if you can basically think like, like a ski lift, but, a lot more plainer than that. She's going to get into it and describe more of how they were made and her experience there. But if you can just kind of get that idea, basically like a very outdated ski lift. And they would use that to carry supplies up to the mountain. I did research, and you'll find out more about why, because God has awesome plans for us all. But so she in this area that she is, because it's up in the mountains, literally up in the mountains, so there's no cars, there's no nothing. So that's how they get their supplies lifted up to them in these things. And so people also use it to travel up and down the mountain too. So that's where we are. As I climbed the slopes to my usual prayer and trysting place with the Lord, I could hear the lines beginning to ring overhead, and I kept waiting to see the cars that would go swinging up those aerial lines to the heights far above. I was told that people, as well as cartons of provisions, could go up them. At last, at the end of the morning, I saw the vehicle and was shocked. It was not a Walden car that came rolling down the cable. It was simply two chairs, similar to ordinary metal chairs with a kind of sunshade over them. There was no protection of any kind. Just two chairs dangling in the air, connected together side by side. In one of the chairs, one man was sitting with nothing underneath him but a narrow footrest fixed to the bottom of the chair. Apparently, he had been up the line testing the cables. Good on you, bro. I don't want that job. In the evening, as I walked up the Braunwald Alp through a pine wood, I could see and hear that the Sesselbahn was in full swing. One after another, these fragile, completely unenclosed chairs went up and down the cables, swinging over fearsome abysses and up the face of mighty rock precipices. One after another, up they went, and down they came in a never ending chain. At first, I thought that ever so many people must be going up in them. And then, as I could see no one, I thought they must be empty. But on the way home, I passed the lower terminus or station and saw the chairs swinging into the station shed, all of them quite empty. Then they reemerged a few minutes later with small boxes and crates strapped to them. A never ending chain of supplies was going up to the houses on the top, ready for the expected tourist visitors who, as soon as the mist cleared, would start making the ascent. It seemed to me then that the Sesselbahn was one of the most loveliest and most fascinating pictures of faith you could think of. For faith has nothing to do with intellectual belief. Faith is obedience. Faith and abandonment to the will of God and power are inseparable. Faith is willingness to do God's will. Unwillingness to abandon one's own will and to obey God is unbelief. They were those tiny chairs with no sides or backs, only a couple of bars, the cable by whose power they traveled overhead, and at a great distance was quite invisible. Underneath there was nothing but the abyss. No earthly ground to support. All one saw was two moving chairs apparently hanging in the air, but they were supported from above. The power came from above. And by means of that power, they were able to travel up in defiance of the law of gravity. They were higher and higher, fixed with a wheel that ran up one cable and down another. One only had to be willing to trust the invisible power, sit down on a chair, and abandon oneself completely. No self effort was possible. Then one would be wafted upward to the heights. It was all a matter of faith and nothing on your part that you could do, except the initial work of choosing to abandon yourself to the Sesselbahn. But oh, how terrifying that choice was. I am so weary of heights and afraid that panic will send me crazily throwing myself down from the pinnacle. It is a fear that has assailed me all my life and kept me from climbing high mountains as other members of the family love to do. What if the cable broke or the power failed? There's nothing underneath you except broken bones and death. No earthly support whatsoever. I could only too readily imagine that any nervous person or someone afraid of heights would be appalled at the very thought of such a journey. True, there would be nothing to do but rest in the chair and be carried up. You just sit there, but oh, how easy to get in a panic and fall. How like that overhead cable the promises of God often seem to be. They look so appallingly frail and unsafe without earthly support of any kind, apparently leading to such impossible situations. It seems they certainly cannot be relied upon. For we will tell ourselves how easily we may be mistaken and claim what was never meant for us personally, but only for great courageous saints of God, prophets, and apostles. But once we abandon ourselves to the promises of God and enter into them in the abandonment of faith and obedience, then all the overhead power begins to work. The traveler resting on and in the promise does nothing but stay in it. Having trusted the promise enough to risk everything to it, up one goes. And no power on earth can hinder arrival at the consummation of the promise and its perfect fulfillment. Though we may seem to meet the most horrifying precipices confronting us and abysses far below which we could never hope to ascend and pass over in our own strength, yet in the spiritual Sesabon of our faith and obedience, everything is triumphantly surmounted. For an hour I watched quite fascinated, for my path led up the valley high over which the chairs went swinging on their way to the heights above. My Lord spoke to me and said, God is not a man that he should lie. Hath he said, and shall he not do it? Or hath he spoken, and shall he not make it good? Numbers 23:19. Fear not to journey on to all the tests and threatening difficulties in the area to which you are returning, as I was with you in the siege of Jerusalem. And though you think that you now have no home in which to return to in England, yet I will be with you everywhere I lead you, and in every circumstance you find yourself. Oh, yes. One may catch one's breath as one begins the challenging ascent in one of God's promises, looking forward to what seems an awfully dangerous precipice. One may feel dizzy as one is swung across and over an abyss between two peaks, but the promises are sure, and trustfully sitting in them, one goes up, running up to greater things. The next part is called The Torrent. Still in Brunvalt, May 25th, 1949. Today I started to walk the right Alp, and there was lovely sunshine, and I made my way down through the fields, rejoicing in all the beauty. The fields were golden with the most beautiful kingcups and dandelions, like blue gems, were everywhere. The Brumbach and the Zilbach Falls faced me. I walked rejoicing as though in heaven, awed at the way all nature around me was sounding forth the utterances of God. Ever since going through the siege of Jerusalem last year and being in constant danger of death, it seems that my physical senses have been quickened to enjoy beautiful scents and sounds of nature to a far higher degree than I did before. This is part of the legacy of joy and blessing which those terrifying experiences bestowed upon me. In the old days, when I visited Switzerland as a girl, I used to be thrilled by the beauties of nature in a special way. I loved the scent of the pine woods, the damp cones and the needles carpeting the ground, the sawn logs and moss and all the moss covered rocks, but now it all means unutterably more to me. I find nature a book of marvels, the language of which I have just begun to understand and interpret. So I walked in ecstasy with natural beauties all around me, speaking forth the praises and character of the Creator. Everything uttered his name. I came to the sawmill beside the torrent, which runs down the valley from the foot of the Brumbach Falls. The water that I saw rushing over and among the rocks and under the bridge was the same water which high overhead had come to a great crisis and leaped so exultantly with such blissful abandonment over the falls. I stood on the bridge and looked at it. Yesterday, I had asked myself, what does the water do when, after its magnificent abandoned leap, it reaches the cruel rocks below, and there is no longer the ecstasy of leaping down, only a rough rock obstructed everyday course before it? On the bridge, I saw and laughed to see what exactly happened to that water. The bed of the torrent was strewn with huge rocks. There were obstructions everywhere, but the water came rushing along, laughing, rejoicing, and absolutely delighted to find its way over. Sorry about that. Delighted to find its way over and around all the obstacles and difficulties. It seemed as happy and cheerful forcing its way among the grim rocks as when it threw itself over the great heights. What a lesson I learned as I watched it. I think almost the loveliest of all of them. Day after day, once the leap of obedience has been made, the power of the waters following along behind, added to the steepness of the riverbed, makes the surmounting of difficulties and obstacles of every kind a daily delight. And the meadows of flowers added their lovely voices, emphasizing the message of the rushing waters. They were so small and yet so brilliant. There were so many of them carpeting the fields, and apart from their beauty, in a way so unnecessary. I asked the Lord to help me understand the message He wanted them to give me, and they simply chuckled and sang it to me. We are all our Creator God's extra loving kindness and tender mercies. We blossom beside the paths of obedience and all over the fields of life. He makes us to flourish and give delight to anyone who may see us. Some people take us for granted as though we are so common and ordinary that it is not worthwhile to notice us. They see no beauty to cause delight. But every worshiping, grateful soul thrills with awe and delight and wonder at the daily blessings and loving kindness of the Creator Father. And we're going to end that today. I'm just past a little bit over a half hour. We may end up going into 3 parts. I just don't want to make them too long. So thank you guys for joining me with this, and we will continue in the next video. God bless you guys. Bye.